Hello everyone. It's great to be back in front of a racing audience. See some familiar faces who've all aged wonderfully well. So it's really nice to be here. Thanks for having me. I want to talk today about the approach to integrity in world athletics. I want to illustrate how I learnt a lot from racing and racing's approach to integrity, which is has always led the world in this space, and really the inspiration for integrity units in many sports came directly from racing. So I want to talk and illustrate how that's evolved, but also how the approach in sport, the rest of the world of sport, has evolved as well, and maybe how point out how racing can in turn learn from the rest of the world sport also. So to begin with, the Athletics Integrity Unit. In world athletics, the IAAF had a absolutely disastrous integrity scandal 5 or so years ago. The president of World Athletics was a corrupt individual who was involved in bribing athletes to hide their doping tests. So that's the president of the International Federation. You could not get a bigger corruption scandal in sport. But from this disaster came a really strong reform process that was instituted by the sport. The Constitution of World Athletics was amended to create an independent integrity unit, which I now head up. The Constitution guarantees the independence of the important functions, testing for doping substances, investigations and prosecutions of integrity rules. The unit independence is overseen by an independent board, so my reporting lines are totally separate to the rest of the commercial side of the business. The World Athletics funds us to the tune of $8 million per year, plus we have $3 million in additional funding from private parts of the racing industry, private races such as road races, New York Marathon, Boston Marathon, etc. So that's us, that's how we're set up. Our remit, an important part of the reform, is just like the racing integrity units, our remit isn't just anti-doping. So in the normal world of sports, you often see anti-doping departments are totally separate from the rest of the integrity space. But taking the lead from racing integrity units and the obvious synergies in policing all areas of integrity within one unit, our remit encapsulates anti-doping, as you see there, which is, I will say, in the sport of athletics, the most prevalent integrity risk for sure. But it also encapsulates issues relating to betting, manipulation of results, and other things that are important in athletics, such as transfers of allegiance rules, age manipulation rules, and also importantly in our unit we have the remit to oversee bribery and corruption of officials. So that's part of the code of conduct that we're policing, not just what happens on the track or on the road. So just to give you an illustration of how we're set up in our structure, the unit was created in 2017. At that time, when I started, there were only 5 people. We're now a team of 30. You see there the board, the independent board oversees our operations, who I report to. And we have functional areas, testing and compliance. So the testing has to take place all over the world. We have 9 people in that area. Intelligence and investigations area has 10. Education and communication 2, and our legal prosecution side has 6 lawyers. All of that is supported in the global context by an extensive network of consultants and contractors who help us with our global reach, which I'll come to as a really big challenge in our sport. So, Down to, I guess, the problem we had, the issues we had when we first created this unit back in 2017, how were we going to approach it? We really had a blank slate, coming from the kind of disaster that I said. The biggest integrity threat, or I won't say the biggest, the most prevalent integrity threat of doping, it's very clear that the testing does not work, really. It's very, very hard to catch determined, well-resourced cheats just with a testing process that is essentially random. It's pretty much impossible. The doping substances are very hard to detect. They don't last long in the system of athletes who use microdosing and all sorts of things to avoid detection. So that was one problem we had. Another important strategic imperative for us is that we wanted to detect serious high-level doping and integrity issues in our sport. A lot of sports have integrity departments that are, to be frank, there for show, and are happy to kind of go along catching the small fry as they go. But that wasn't how we wanted to do it. We knew that we needed to build a capability that was capable of catching the serious, high-level integrity threats in the sport. Another problem, we had to be effective in all parts of the world. So in athletics, it's a truly global sport, probably the most global. For example, at the World Championships in Doha, there were medals won by over 40 different countries. And you just don't get that kind of high-level success across that many nations in any other sport, basically. So we have to have a team that was capable of actually uncovering wrongdoing in Ethiopia, in Russia, in Brazil, as well as in Europe, North America, etc. So that was a really big challenge and a really interesting strategic imperative for us. We wanted to uncover the networks and stories behind cases. Another thing that it's easy for integrity units to do is to go from one case to the next, whether it's doping or other integrity issues, without really creating change in the sport. So a huge strategic goal for us was to understand the story behind cases, why the cheating occurred, who was behind it as well. You know, because we know it's not just usually the athlete who has a positive test. They usually have help or assistance. There's networks behind these issues. And finally, being a worldwide sport, we had to deliver this in a cost-effective way. We had 8 million when we started, 11 million now. We needed to do all these things in a way that was affordable. We couldn't do it in a way, for example, it wasn't an option for us to just throw millions and millions of dollars of extra tests to try to catch dopers. It's just not a sustainable model and never going to work. So our answer to all that was really to establish the intelligence and investigations function. This is a bit of a busy slide, but what the point of it is that we decided the real strategic imperative was to go very, very hard on intelligence as being the fundamental basis of how we were going to go about it. So every sport in the world with an integrity unit talks about intelligence and the importance of intelligence. That's nothing new. But what we wanted to do was really ramp this up to make it the complete centrepiece of our unit, to throw lots and lots of resources at it, and also to integrate it with all the other areas of the business as well. Have it really closely integrated with our testing, with our legal, etc., etc. So, again, apologies for the busy slide, but the point of this is that our budget allocation for intelligence is 2 million in direct costs. We have 10 permanent staff there, and you can see the makeup of the staff there. They're supported by external resources. In the international context, it's really important to have resources that we can call on very quickly to help us going into particular places for particular problems. An important thing in building this team and the human capacity was the type of people we needed to recruit. The international nature of our problem meant that kind of traditional law enforcement wasn't enough to do this. So we're really looking at people with security services type backgrounds, people who have experience in hostile environments, Afghanistan, Syria, etc., who can go into a place where you don't have any support from law enforcement or an athletics federation or another sport that can help you, but be able to get the information we need and understand what's going on there. So they're the type of people that we have internally, and they have the contacts and the ability to latch on to a great support network that surrounds them around the world. So that team is supported by heavy investment in technology as well, which is the bottom line there. So we've got a great case management and intelligence database that brings all of our information together. But in addition to that, we've invested heavily in technical equipment to be able to analyse telephones, computers and things like that we seize under our rules, and also analysis software that helps us collate and bring together information into something meaningful. So the job that all of these people do is the intelligence cycle, and this is something that also everybody knows about, or most people know about. The idea of the intelligence cycle is very simple. You have a plan of what information you need to collect. You collect the information, you collate it, you put it into some ordered form, which allows you then to analyse it. And from that analysis, we gain insights that then goes back into the planning process. And it's a beautiful, neat little circle that works very well. The reality looks more like that. The big challenge and the reason we need to invest resources to actually do this properly is that in most sports, and in international athletics probably worse than any other sport, there's a ton of information out there. It's all completely unstructured in completely different databases or on sheets of paper. It's all, however, extremely useful. You need it to be able to take a targeted approach to what you're doing in testing, in investigations, in strategic decisions. But it's all, without the investment in resources, it's all out there. It might as well be, in the clouds. So to go through some examples of what we're talking about here, and hopefully these little things highlight. There you go. So these are just an example there. ABP profiles is something that lit up. ABP is the athlete's biological profile. So that's just a whole bunch of data that's in our testing databases. It's meaningless unless we have in our staff medical, scientific analysts who work with us day to day, feeding directly into the Intel team to quickly respond to those profiles and use that to adjust testing plans, etc. Another example, whereabouts. This is for doping. In World Anti-Doping Code, athletes have to record whereabouts so that you know where to go to test them. The way that is structured in the world of anti-doping is that the information is collected to enable testing, not as so it's not there in the database that actually enables you to analyse it. So we have to have a lot of resources who are actually looking at that information to create patterns, to analyse where people are and what they're doing, to turn it into intelligence rather than just as an operational matter. Open source social media information. We spend a huge amount of time pairing whereabouts, for example, with the open source and social media to create profiles for people that we need to target. Event organisers was one that was highlighted there. Athletics is a very complicated system. There are individual races all over the world. They all have different accreditation systems. So unlike racing, where you generally have a nice central database of who your people are, in the world of athletics, it is all over the place. And so we need to actually bring that all together and collate it to create data that we can use. From our technical acquisitions, I'll talk a little bit more about that later. There was also a line up there, DCS, which were doping control forms, which are the forms that are filled in when someone collects a sample. We collect samples in all countries of the world, basically. The companies we use to collect those samples all have different systems. In many cases, the forms are in paper, because where we collect samples is often high altitude in the mountains of Kenya or Ethiopia. But those doping control forms are a rich source of information. The athlete has to fill in their previous substances they've been taking, who their coach is, who their manager is. So we need to actually literally get those forms and bring the data out off the forms and into our databases. So if we take all that unstructured information, put a huge amount of resources into structuring it technologically or with people, it allows us then to get the analytical outputs that we need. And our skilled analysts produce timelines, relationship charts. These aren't things that are unusual. You've all probably seen them before. But the hard part of getting there is actually, in fact, bringing all that unstructured data into something that you can work with. So this intelligence effort allows us to identify tactical matters, who to investigate, who to test, and help us enhance investigations. But it also really, and this is something that can't be understated, allows us to make strategic decisions about where we're going to allocate resources, what rules need to be changed, where we have vulnerabilities, and which organisations external we need to partner with. This is just really a slide to point out what I said earlier, that the close relationship of our intel people with the rest of the team is absolutely central to what we do. In many organisations, the investigators or the intel people are kind of huddled off and it's a bit of secret squirrel society. Ours isn't like that. We have open plan. The intel are sitting right next to the testing or the lawyers, and there's no secrets, and it's really important that on the day-to-day basis, information is flowing back and forth. So a couple of case studies before I finish up to illustrate some of the points. This 2019, we had an investigation into the Russian Athletics Federation. One of their star athletes is a high jumper, Daniil Lysenko. He had a whereabouts case, which meant he failed 3 times to give the right whereabouts for testing, which is heading for a 1 or 2 year penalty. Unfortunately, he provided a false explanation to explain why he did that. He created a false hospital where he got a false medical report from false doctors. You couldn't get a more fake explanation that you can imagine. That was the first part of the investigation. We were able to go into Russia to do that. The second part of the investigation is we wanted to know who was actually behind this, because it didn't seem like something the athlete himself, the 22-year-old kid, cooked up. So this is where we really got into the technological use of information. We have rules in athletics that we can seize computers, phones, hard drives. We did that. We have great technology. We don't just use, for example, one program to download and analyse the information. We use 4 different ones, because in recovering the deleted files, what we found is that every program has slightly different strengths or weaknesses, so you get a greater amount of recovered data from using all 4. We produced a huge amount of data from this. We needed to bring in a flash team of analysts, including many Russian-speaking analysts, over 6 months to analyse it all. But what ended up happening was that we made a great case against the Russian Federation president, the Russian Federation CEO, and other senior staff members. The case is still ongoing, but the current situation is that the entire Federation Council or Board has resigned, and the matter's now before the World Athletics for final determination. So that's an example of turning a simple case into something much bigger and more important because of the technological and capability we have. And finally, I'm out of time, I'm sorry, I'm probably talking too quickly. This is an example of a technological project that we're undertaking to analyse performances. So performance data is really important in all sport. It's all just hard to analyse unless you have something like this. We're looking at very complex algorithms that I couldn't possibly explain to you to analyse unusual performance trajectories and unusual spikes in performance from athletes. This will be fed in an automatic way into our Intel team, into our testing team, to enable better targeting of our athletes. So that's all. I'm out of time, and thank you, and we'll see you on the panel.